The discovery, the emergency beacon had been screaming across the galaxy for 3 standard music cycles before the Galactic Council finally assembled in the grand chamber that floated in the neutral zone between star systems. Representatives from 47 species gathered. In growing panic, the holographic displays showed something that shouldn't exist, something that defied every principle of galactic safety protocols established over millennia. Commander Vex of the Korean Empire stood at the central podium, his crystalline form reflecting the ominous red glow of the warning displays. His voice carried the weight of centuries of military experience as he addressed the assembly. What we are witnessing is unprecedented. Sector 79, Alpha has registered energy signatures matching those from the Forbidden Archives. The entity we believed sealed away 5,000 years ago is stirring. A wave of distress rippled through the chamber. Species that had evolved past the need for vocal communication sent pulses of fear through the shared neural network. Others clicked, chirped, or hummed their concern in languages both ancient and new. The Zephroni delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a magnetic field, pulsed with agitation. This cannot be. The ceiling was absolute. Every civilization contributed their most powerful technology to ensure it would never wake. Vex manipulated the holographic interface, and the display shifted to show a barren region of space that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. Our sensors detected the first tremors 18 cycles ago. We believed them to be natural stellar phenomena. We were wrong. The containment field is failing. Conservative estimates give us 40 cycles before complete breach. Optimistic projections are not worth discussing. In the back of the chamber, almost overlooked among the larger and more ostentatious delegates, sat the human contingent. Ambassador Sarah Chin watched the proceedings with quiet attention, her dark eyes tracking every detail. Beside her sat Dr. Marcus Webb, a physicist whose reputation for unconventional thinking had made him both celebrated and controversial. Equal measure, the third member of their team, Captain James Rodriguez, stood with the easy confidence of someone who had faced impossible odds before. The Vulcan High Counselor, a towering figure with 6 arms and skin like polished obsidian, spoke with a voice that resonated through the chamber. We must evacuate every inhabited system within 500 light years. The historical records are clear. When this entity last walked free, it consumed 17 civilizations before it could be contained. Billions died. Entire species were erased from existence. Evacuation. The Threnodai representative's tentacles writhed in distress. Do you understand what you're proposing? The logistics alone would take decades. The panic would destabilize half the galaxy. And where would they go? Every habitable world is already claimed or settled. Arguments erupted across the chamber. Some called for immediate military response. Others insisted on attempting to reinforce the ancient seals. A few suggested simply hoping the projections were wrong. Through it all, the human delegation remained silent, listening and observing. Finally, Vex slammed his crystalline appendage against the podium, creating a sharp sound that cut through the chaos. Enough. We will hear proposals from each delegation present. Your solutions in order of council. Seniority. He began calling on representatives, starting with the oldest civilizations. The Koreans proposed a massive energy bombardment to destroy the entity before it fully awakened, the Zephroni suggested, attempting to drain its power through specially designed conduits. The Valkyrie offered to sacrifice one of their colony worlds to create a new prison, though the moral implications hung heavy in the air. Each proposal had merit and each had fatal flaws that became apparent under scrutiny. Hours passed, the proposals became increasingly desperate. Some suggested using forbidden weapons that had been banned for good reason. Others talked of sacrifices that no ethical civilization should consider. The mood in the chamber grew darker with each failed suggestion. Ambassador Chin finally stood. Her movement was so understated that several delegates didn't notice at first. Vex optical sensors focused on her. The human delegation wishes to speak. We do, Shin said simply. Her voice was calm, almost conversational, a stark contrast to the escalating panic around her. We've been analyzing the data you've presented. We have a proposal. A murmur ran through the chamber. The humans were the newest members of the Galactic Council, having joined a mere 30 years ago. Their planet was still considered backwater by many standards. Their technology derivative of what they'd learned from other species. Threnodai delegate's translator conveyed something that approximated a skeptical laugh. With all due respect, Ambassador, this crisis requires solutions from civilizations with millennia of experience. Perhaps the humans should observe and learn. Chen's expression didn't change, but Captain Rodriguez's jaw tightened slightly. Dr. Webb simply adjusted his glasses, a habit he kept despite having his vision corrected years ago. Chin continued as if the interruption hadn't occurred. The entity you're describing feeds on energy. Correct. Every historical account mentions how it consumed power sources, drained stars, absorbed the very weapons fired at it. Vex nodded slowly. This is accurate. It is why conventional warfare proved useless. It made the entity stronger than you've been approaching this wrong. Webb interjected, stepping forward. His enthusiasm was barely contained. You're treating it like a military problem. It's not. It's an energy regulation problem. You don't fight fire with fire when dealing with something that eats fire. The Zephroni delegate pulsed with confusion. Explain. Chin took over. Dr. Webb has developed a theoretical framework based on something we discovered in our own star system. There are certain frequencies, certain patterns of energy that don't feed the entity, but instead create what he calls a harmonic disruption. Think of it as the difference between food and poison. Both are consumed, but only one sustained. This is speculation, though. Valkyrie counselor rumbled. You have no proof such a thing would work. We have proof of concept. Rodriguez spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded ships in combat. 3 years ago we encountered a similar entity, though much smaller, near our Jupiter station. It was consuming the station's power core. Our weapons only made it stronger. Dr. Webb's frequency pattern starved it. Instead, it took 18 hours, but the entity collapsed on itself. The chamber erupted. Some delegates demanded proof. Others called the claim impossible. The historical records contained no mention of humans encountering such entities. Chen waited for the noise to die down, then activated a data crystal. The holographic display shifted to show classified human records, sensor logs, video footage, and detailed analysis of an encounter that humanity had kept quiet, afraid of causing panic or being dismissed as inexperienced newcomers. Making things up, Vex studied the data. With intense focus, his crystalline structure refracted the light in patterns that other Corthians would recognize as deep concentration. This entity was significantly smaller than what we face now. Yes, Webb acknowledged. About 1% of its mass, but the principle should scale. Energy is energy. And harmonic disruption works at quantum levels. Size becomes irrelevant when you're working with fundamental frequencies. The Threnodite delegate skepticism was palpable. Should scale. You want us to stake billions of lives on should? Chin met the alien's gaze steadily. No, we want you to stake those lives on human ingenuity, on our ability to find solutions where others see only problems. We're the species that split atoms before we left our own planet. We're the ones who looked at the vacuum of space and decided to live in it. Anyway, we don't have millennia of experience, but we have something else. We have the ability to look at impossible situations and say, let's try something new. The chamber fell silent. The weight of the decision hung in the air like a physical presence. Vex turned to face the full assembly. The human proposal is our most viable option, all in favor of allowing them to attempt their solution. The vote was not unanimous, but it passed. As the session concluded and delegates filed out in worried clusters, Vex approached the human delegation. I hope your confidence is not misplaced, Ambassador. If you fail, there may not be time for another attempt. Chin nodded gravely. We understand the stakes, Commander. We won't fail. As the humans prepared to leave, Rodriguez muttered to Webb, no pressure, Doc, just the entire galaxy depending on your math being right. Webb smiled grimly. When has that ever been different for humanity? We've been defying the odds since we climbed down from the trees. The entity continued to wake in the darkness of space, unaware that for the first time in its ancient existence, it would face a species that didn't fight the way others did. Species that looked at impossible problems and saw only puzzles waiting to be solved. The humans had 40 cycles to prove they were right. The countdown had begun. The resolution, the human research vessel Prometheus, hung in space like a defiant spark against the void. Around it, arrayed in a careful perimeter, floated observation ships from every major species in the galactic council. They had come to witness either humanity's greatest triumph or its most spectacular failure. There would be no middle ground. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in the Prometheus's main laboratory, surrounded by equipment that represented the combined effort of Earth's brightest minds. The past 37 cycles had been a blur of calculations, simulations, and sleepless nights. His team had worked around the clock, refining the harmonic frequency pattern that would either save billions or condemn them. The pressure should have been crushing, but Webb felt strangely calm. This was what humans did best. They thrived when the impossible became the only option. Ambassador Chin moved through the ship's corridors with practice efficiency, checking on different teams and maintaining communication with the Council fleet. She paused at a viewport, staring out at the target. The entity was visible now, a rowing mass of darkness that seemed to devour the starlight around it. It had grown substantially since the emergency session, feeding on the ambient energy of space itself. The ancient containment field flickered around it like dying embers, the last remnants of technology from civilizations long dead. It's beautiful in a terrible way, Captain, Rodriguez said, joining her at the viewport. His reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a man who hadn't slept properly in days, but whose eyes remained sharp and alert, like staring into the heart of a black hole. Beauty won't matter if we can't stop it, Chin replied quietly. The Vulcan delegation sent another message. They're still pushing for the bombardment option as a backup plan. Rodriguez snorted. A backup plan that would just make that thing stronger and probably destroy half our fleet in the process. No thanks. I'll trust Webb science over their panic. In the laboratory, Webb was making final adjustments to the array of harmonic generators that lined the walls. Each device was calibrated to produce specific frequencies that would, in theory, create a cascade effect within the entity's energy matrix. It was elegant in its simplicity, which made Webb both confident and terrified. The best solutions often were simple, but simple meant there were fewer variables to adjust if something went wrong. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, Webb's lead assistant, looked up from her console. Doctor, we're receiving some unusual readings. The entity's energy signature is fluctuating more rapidly than predicted. It's like it's becoming agitated. Webb moved to her station, his eyes scanning the data streams. It knows we're here, not consciously, but on some fundamental level. It's detecting the presence of organized energy sources. All these ships, all this technology, were like a buffet announcing itself. He tapped his communicator. Bridge, we need to move up the timeline. If we wait much longer, it might breach containment before we're ready. Rodriguez's voice came back immediately. Understood. All stations advance to Phase 1. This is not a drill. The Prometheus began moving closer to the entity, and with it the entire human fleet. 3 support vessels carrying backup generators, medical facilities, and evacuation capabilities moved in formation. On the observation ships, alien crews watched with a mixture of hope and dread. Korean Commander Vex had his entire tactical team analyzing every moment, ready to order a retreat if the situation deteriorated. As the Prometheus crossed the threshold of the failing containment field, the entity reacted. Tendrils of pure energy lashed out, probing and testing. The ship's shields flared as they deflected the initial contact. Webb watched his instruments carefully. It's curious more than aggressive right now. That'll change the moment we activate the generators. Everyone, final system checks. We only get one shot at this. The team moved with practiced precision. Each person knew their role, had rehearsed it dozens of times in simulation, but simulations didn't capture the existential weight of knowing that billions of lives across hundreds of worlds depended on them. Getting this exactly right. Chen's voice came over the shipwide channel. All personnel, this is the ambassador. In a few moments, we're going to attempt something that has never been done at this scale. Remember that every species that has ever accomplished anything great did so because someone was willing to try. Today we show the galaxy what humanity means. We don't back down. We don't give up. We find a way. Webb smiled at her words. It was very human. That refusal to accept defeat. Other Species had wisdom, technology, and experience that spanned millennia. But humans had something else, something that couldn't be quantified in equations or measured in laboratories. They had the audacity to believe that being new to the galaxy didn't mean being lesser. That fresh perspective could be an advantage rather than a weakness. Generators are online, Kim reported. Power level stable, frequency calibration locked. Webb took a deep breath. Begin the sequence. Phase 1. Initiate. The harmonic generators hummed to life, producing sound waves that existed at frequencies beyond normal hearing but resonated through the ship's structure. The entity reacted immediately. It surged toward the Prometheus, its mass expanding as it prepared to consume this new energy. Zors. On the observation ships, several delegates gasped or made equivalent expressions of alarm. It looked like the entity was attacking, like the humans had just provoked it into destroying them. But Webb watched his instruments with growing satisfaction. It's working. Look at the internal resonance patterns. It's trying to absorb the frequency, but it can't process it. The harmonic disruption is creating interference in its energy matrix. The entity's advance slowed, then stopped. It began to contract slightly, its edges becoming less defined. Rodriguez kept the ship steady, fighting the urge to retreat as the massive presence filled their view screens. How long until we see definitive results? Patience, Captain, Webb replied, though his own heart was racing. We're unmaking something that has existed for millions of years. It won't happen instantly. Minutes passed like hours. Generators continued their work, flooding the space around the entity with frequencies that disrupted rather than nourished. Slowly, measurably, the entity began to shrink. Its violent churning slowed to sluggish movements. The darkness that had seemed so absolute began to thin, allowing starlight to pierce through. On the Corian observation ship, Vex watched in amazement. Incredible, they're actually doing it. The energy readings are dropping by measurable percentages. The entity is starving. The Threnodai delegate, who had been so skeptical, transmitted a pulse of wonder. I would not have believed it possible. They're not fighting it. They're simply making it impossible for it to exist in its current state. But Webb knew they weren't done yet. Phase 2. Prepare to initiate. We need to accelerate the process. At this rate, it could take weeks to fully dissipate the entity, and our generators won't last that long. Kim's fingers flew across her console. Phase 2 ready. This is the dangerous part. We're going to be amplifying the harmonic frequency by a factor of 10. The shields might not hold. If it lashes out, do it, Rodriguez ordered. We didn't come this far to play. It's safe now. The generators surged, their output increasing dramatically. The entity convulsed, its form breaking apart into fragments that tried desperately to coalesce back together. But the harmonic disruption was too powerful, too perfectly calibrated. Each fragment that tried to rejoin was met with frequencies that prevented cohesion. The entity was being unmade at a fundamental level, its very structure torn apart by energies it couldn't comprehend or consume. The Prometheus shuddered as the entity made one final attempt to strike back. Energy tendrils, more desperate than aggressive, hammered against the shields. Alarms blared as power systems strained to compensate. Webb gripped his console as the deck tilted beneath his feet. Hold. Together, he muttered, unsure if he was talking to the ship or himself. Just a little longer, then suddenly it was over. The entity collapsed inward, its mass compressing to a fraction of its previous size, and then simply dissipated. Where once had been a force capable of consuming star systems, there was now only empty space and the fading traces of energy signatures, the ancient threat that had haunted the galaxy for millennia was gone, unmade by harmonic frequencies and human determination. The silence on the bridge was profound. Rodriguez was the first to speak. Status report, entity energy signature at 0. Kim reported, her voice shaking with relief and exhaustion. It's gone. It's really gone. Generators shutting down to safe mode. Shield integrity at 42%, but holding. Webb sank into a chair suddenly. Aware of how tired he was, they'd done it. Against all odds, with a solution that others had dismissed as theoretical and untested. They'd actually done it. The communications channel erupted with messages from the observation fleet. Congratulations, expressions of amazement, requests for detailed technical data. Vex's voice cut through the chatter. Human vessel Prometheus, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I extend our deepest gratitude and respect. You have saved countless lives today. Your species has proven itself in a way that goes beyond any trial we could have designed. Chin smiled, accepting the praise with grace, but she knew the real significance of what had happened. It wasn't just about destroying the entity. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity belonged here, that being the newest species didn't mean being the weakest or least capable. Thank you, Commander Vex. We're just glad we could help. As the Prometheus began its journey back to the fleet anchorage, Webb stood at the viewport, watching the stars. Kim joined him and they stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Do you think they understand now, she asked quietly, that we're not just lucky or reckless? Webb considered the question. Maybe, but honestly I don't think we did this to prove anything to them. We did it because it needed to be done and we were capable of doing it. That's the most human thing of all, isn't it? We don't wait for permission or validation. We see a problem and we solve it. In the weeks that followed, the story of how humanity had defeated an ancient cosmic threat spread across the galaxy. It became a turning point in how other species viewed humans. No longer were they seen as primitive newcomers who had stumbled into galactic society by accident. They were recognized as a species with unique value, with perspectives and approaches that millennial-old civilizations had never considered. The Galactic Council formally requested that humans establish a permanent research division dedicated to solving problems that conventional wisdom deemed impossible. Universities across dozens worlds began offering courses in what they called human adaptive methodology, studying the peculiar way that humans approach challenges. But perhaps the most significant change was quieter and more personal. Throughout the galaxy, when species encountered problems that seemed insurmountable, when ancient solutions failed and traditional wisdom offered no answers, they began to ask a new question: what would the humans do? And that question, more than any weapon or technology, was humanity's greatest contribution to the galactic community. Not the solution itself, but the audacity to believe that solutions existed, waiting to be found by those brave enough or foolish enough to look For them, the Prometheus returned to Earth orbit to heroes' welcome, but Webb Chin and Rodriguez knew the truth. They hadn't done anything extraordinary by human standards. They'd simply done what humans always did when faced with impossible odds. They'd refused to accept that impossible meant unbeatable. They'd looked at the darkness and said, "We can handle this." And they had. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way.